That's what a deal maker does. You got to say, look, they want this. You've got to convince them with this.
Imagine a headline that redraws the map of Europe overnight. A leaked deal that puts wartime allies against each other. A United States president proposing terms so controversial that entire governments recoil. This is the new reality of the Russia-Ukraine war in 2025. A secret draft deal backing Ukraine's reconstruction in exchange for major control over Ukrainian natural resources, reworked ceasefire terms, and territorial concessions. Leaked, exposed. And now, European leaders are incandescent with fury. Tonight, we unpack what's real, what's leaked, and why this diplomatic bomb may have just changed everything. The leak, what we know. On February 17th, 2025, a confidential agreement reportedly drafted by US and Ukrainian negotiators was leaked to the public. The plan suggested creating a joint US-Ukraine investment fund that would grant the US a 50% share of revenues from Ukraine's natural resources, including minerals, oil, gas, and infrastructure assets. According to the draft, this fund would manage future exploitation licenses.
President Trump says US negotiators are making progress in their efforts to end the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Port revenues and energy exports under legal jurisdiction favorable to the US. The original valuation of the potential deal was jaw-dropping in the hundreds of billions. Washington reportedly pitched it as a mechanism to recoup past financial aid spent on Ukraine. Simultaneously, a separate 28-point peace framework connected to the agreement was circulated, allegedly recommending territorial concessions by Kyiv, limitations on Ukraine's military size, and new terms for a ceasefire with Russia. The leak sent shockwaves across Kyiv, Washington, and especially Brussels. Suddenly, what had been private negotiations became global headlines overnight. Europe's reaction: indignation, fear, unrest. European leaders responded swiftly and angrily. Officials from Germany, France, Poland, and other NATO countries issued a joint statement. Any peace deal must involve Europe. They rejected unilateral US proposals, especially plans that might allow Russia to retain territory or limit Ukraine's defense capabilities. At the heart of the outrage, the resource deal language. Many European analysts and politicians likened it to a form of economic colonization, arguing that handing over half of Ukraine's resource wealth to a foreign power while Kyiv is wounded was tantamount to exploitation.
Our teams in Geneva, that framework is on the table and we are ready to move.
Behind closed doors, top EU diplomats reportedly warned the United States that such a deal would unravel trust between allies. And in capitals across Europe, the message was clear. Any peace plan arriving from Washington must pass through Brussels first. Ukraine's backlash, rejection, resistance, and resolve. In Kyiv, the response was immediate and firm. For Ukraine, this wasn't just a bad deal, it was dangerous. Accepting terms that ceded resource control, territorial integrity, or control over its own economy was seen as a betrayal of the war's sacrifices. President Volodymyr Zelensky and his advisors signaled strong resistance, warning that the leaked draft was unacceptable and undermined Ukrainian sovereignty. They demanded an amended framework, one that respected territorial integrity, allowed for future NATO membership, and excluded clauses for forced asset transfers. Ukrainian civil society and human rights groups added their voices. They voiced concern about how reconstruction would be handled if resources were controlled by foreign powers. For Kyiv, the message was simple: no peace at the cost of independence. Why Trump pushed for this deal? Strategy or leverage? From the perspective of the US administration, the draft deal represented a brutal calculation of cost and influence. After years of trillions in aid and military support pledged to Ukraine, The resource-sharing proposal was presented as a payback mechanism, a way for the US to recuperate expenses while giving Ukraine reconstruction funds. Moreover, the 28-point peace framework offered a potential end to one of the world's most costly and destabilizing conflicts, if Kyiv accepted the terms. For an American president facing domestic pressure over foreign spending, ending the war could be politically advantageous. It was, in essence, an offer wrapped as a deal, but the cost was Ukraine's sovereignty, credibility with allies, and trust among partner nations. The global implications, if this deal goes through. The ramifications of this leaked deal go far beyond Ukraine's borders. Ukraine would effectively surrender control of major natural resource wealth.
President Trump would, for now at least, rather leave those sort of details to his
critical for its war recovery and long-term development. European security architecture would be fractured. NATO's eastern flank would feel betrayed if a US-Russia agreement proceeded without allied input. Russia could consolidate gains, avoid war crime accountability, and reshape the map of Eastern Europe. Worldwide, autocracies might exploit this blueprint. Trade sovereignty for sweet, but potentially hollow, reconstruction aid. Europe stunned by Trump's private assurances to Ukraine. European officials were blindsided when reports surfaced that Trump had privately told Ukrainian intermediaries he would push Kyiv toward negotiations with Russia if he returned to the White House. Multiple European diplomats, speaking to outlets like the Washington Post and Politico, have confirmed that they were never informed of these discussions, and that they directly contradict the unified NATO stance of no talks without Ukraine's consent. Brussels calls it parallel diplomacy, a massive red line. European Union officials publicly complained that Trump and his advisors were conducting parallel diplomacy. That's a diplomatic term for dangerous, unofficial back channels that can confuse allies, signal weakness to adversaries, and destabilize long-term strategy. An EU ambassador stated plainly, he is making promises on behalf of a government he does not lead. To European governments, this behavior risks sending mixed signals to Moscow, something they consider reckless and destabilizing, especially during an active war. Zelensky's government put in an awkward position. What makes the leak even more explosive is that Ukrainian officials confirmed contact with Trump allies, particularly former US military officer Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, who reportedly met with senior Ukrainian figures. Ukraine has insisted these were informal conversations, not negotiations. The mere idea that Trump intermediaries were offering a future shift in US policy placed Zelensky in a delicate position. Play along.
If Ukraine can make a deal, it's a good thing. I think it's great for both. Frankly, I think it's great for both.
And risk angering Biden and NATO allies. Reject the overture and risk future punishment if Trump wins. It was a no-win diplomatic headache for Kyiv. NATO fears Trump might pivot away from Ukraine. The leaked details have fed a growing concern in NATO headquarters. Trump may drastically scale back US military support if re-elected. His public statements already fuel this fear. He repeatedly says he wants the war done in 24 hours. He has questioned blank check aid to Kyiv, and he openly pressures Europe to pay more. For NATO defense planners, these comments, combined with the newly leaked back-channel messaging, signal a potential US strategic pivot that could reshape the entire security landscape of Europe. So if you want to stay ahead of the headlines, be part of this channel's community and never miss a single twist. Smash that like button, drop a comment. What do you think Trump's real plan is? And make sure you subscribe with notifications on, because the next 30 days could reshape global politics, and you don't want to be the last to know.